Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I am your host, Tom Grossi, and boy, my guest and I are currently running on very little sleep after the dramatic Monday Night Football win by the Green Bay Packers against the 49ers, a game that I thought was going to be a walk in the park and I was going to be able to go to sleep by halftime, but nay, said the 49ers. Nay. But it's at least a good celebration. So, that being said, that should give at least a hint onto who we're talking to, because next week, the Packers, they have a bye. They can't lose, my friends. This is a great day. And so, I decided, let's bring on a fellow Green Bay Packers fan besides myself to talk at you, and that Green Bay Packers fan is Mr. Jason Butler. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I don't know, with the way that the Packers defense look, we could lose this week.
You know what? That actually is a fantastic point. You know, it's that bad. The defense, you know, they picked it up in the fourth quarter, but other than that, we just love allowing teams to score 20 or more points in the first half and then, you know, making Aaron Rodgers do backflips in order to get us back into the game. So, yeah.
One leg and all.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? As Packer fans, this is something that we should at least be used to a little bit. And so, again, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being, obviously, the fan of the greatest team there is, and not a disgusting, terrible Vikings fan, you know, or worse, a Bears fan. And so, that being said, before we even get into this season, before we talk about McCarthy, before we start getting super duper depressed, let's start focusing on the happier times. I want to know kind of how you became a Green Bay Packers fan. Was this something you were inherited? Was it something that, you know, you wandered on the street and saw a logo and were like, that's my team? Kind of give me the background on how you made the ultimate life decision and the best life decision you could possibly make.
Well, man, I'm telling you, when I first started watching your videos, when I learned, you know, how you became a Packers fan, I was kind of impressed because we kind of have the same kind of story. My dad was a huge Dallas fan. Huge.
Oh.
And, you know, it's weird because we have so many different teams in my family. Like my mom's side is Redskins fans, and my dad's side is Dallas and Giants fans and Vikings fans. So I didn't really get into football too much until I was, you know, kind of getting ready to get into high school, you know, 7th, 8th grade. And my first game, I think I actually sat down and watched, was 2007, Week 13. It was Dallas against Green Bay. And ironically enough, that was the first time we saw what would become the future legend in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, yes.
When he came in the first half for Brett Favre, who went down. And, you know, I wanted to root against my dad because my dad was talking about how great Dallas has always been. So I just chose Green Bay, and ever since then, I've pulled for him.
Yeah,
and he did not like that till the day he passed away. Let me tell you what.
Yeah, that's. But you're going 11 years strong, you know. So this ain't no bandwagon thing, you know. This is over a decade now that you've stuck with the Packers. But I have to say, you know, you picked a good time to become a Packers fan. You know, you got a Super Bowl win pretty early on into your fandom, right? And you know
that was nice.
Yeah, that's great, right? That's like a little, like, you know, affirming of what your life decisions. And then, you know, we've been playoff contenders, you know, for how many years? So, all right, that's pretty fantastic. And I am always in support of going against one's father if they are a Dallas Cowboys fan, because again,
definitely.
Literally cut from the same cloth here, and that's phenomenal. That's interesting. So you've kind of seen, like, Aaron Rodgers' entire career, and like that's been the guy.
Blessing.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a great guy to pick it up with. I mean, like I had the experience of having Brett Favre, you know, like early on, and you know, I go back and forth. You know, who I love more? It's Aaron, but you know, who I love more, and you know, kind of seeing different people play. But yeah, so like as a Packers fan, you know, like did you ever like realize? Because I realized it doing this show, that like we got it pretty damn well. Like we've got it good. You know, talking to either other fans in the division or, you know, like Browns fans, we're doing all right for ourselves. Did you realize that our team, while loved by many, is also the subject of a lot of envy within the league?
Oh man, the Green Bay Packers are in their 100th season. I think that's really exciting. And honestly, the Packers haven't had it too bad for much of that 100 seasons.
It's true.
They've had, especially the past 3 quarterbacks they've had. Of being a true Packers fan, I like to go back and watch the Bart Starrs. I like to watch, Brett Favre in his days. We do have it pretty good, and it's why, looking at now and seeing the injuries and stuff that Aaron goes through, it concerns me that maybe we're turning the page and we're going away from all the positivity we've had the last couple of decades.
Yeah, it's and that's kind of getting into where we are right now, because ever since our Super Bowl win against the Steelers, we've been there, right? Whether it's going 15-1, whether it's going to NFC Championship games against the Seahawks or the Falcons, or at least making wild cards, etc. We seem like we've always been in the race, unless a catastrophic injury occurs in which we don't make the playoffs.
Last year,
yeah, exactly, and you get the Brett Huntley very short-lived era. But that being said, this season, how it's kind of unfolded, because I'll speak for myself. Going into the season, I had really high expectations that the defense was going to be improved. We finally got rid of Dom Capers. The offense was going to be churning along, and we got to a breadth of new talent, especially at wide receiver. We had Aaron Jones coming back, etc. I feel like, actually sitting down and watching these games, though, yikes. It's it has definitely not been my expectations, let's say, except for the Bills game. But what are your thoughts on this season so far, with all the injuries, with the defense, how they're playing? You alluded to that earlier, and even how Rodgers has been playing. What has your take on this so far?
Honestly, when I sat down last night, kind of prepping for our interview today, I was really torn, because I think the word to use for this season is inconsistency. And I think that's, kind of where we're at, because even in the San Francisco game last night, it proved how inconsistent we are as a team. We had 3 turnovers, Aaron threw a whole ton of yards, but there were points in the game where both sides of the ball were just kind of offsetting. Mm-hmm. I wrote it down last night. We have to play a complete game when we're not playing the Bills.
Yeah.
And that's been Green Bay's point. We were up 3 scores against Minnesota. We let them come back. We're not going to talk about the Lions game last week because poor Mason Crosby, but we have to play a complete game. All sides of the ball, offense, defense, special teams, have to come together and play a game. And it's not like we're doing terrible. Aaron's thrown for 2,000 yards. The offense has run for, 600 yards as a collective. It's just inconsistency. They're not putting games together. And I think that's just been the most frustrating thing, other than, of course, the injuries, because we can never keep the whole team on the field.
Yeah. No, and the Packers, they've gotten bitten by the injury bug a ton of times throughout Aaron Rodgers' tenure as quarterback. And I completely agree with you in the term being consistency, because you have a defense that they look like 2 completely different teams. When they come out in the first quarter and when they come out in the second half. The second half, they usually lock it down. The Vikings game was a bit different, but they lock it down. They did this against the Redskins. They did this against the Bears. They did this against the 49ers. They did this against the Lions even, holding them to a small amount of points. But then in the first half, they're allowing 20-plus points. And so you're basically putting all the pressure on Aaron Rodgers, which forces Mike McCarthy and that offense to get away from the run game, to get away from Aaron Jones, which all the fans are clamoring to see more and more and more of.
Right.
But when you're down 20 points, running is not really the best option at this point. Even if it's working, it takes a lot of time off the clock, and you kind of just put it all on Aaron's shoulders. And again, we are in a position where we have a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he's able to do that from time to time. Example, Bears and 49ers. But it's impossible and unrealistic for us to expect that of him every single week.
Yeah, I think people talk about, especially like the big news names, Stephen A. Smith, and the people like that, Colin Cowherd, oh my goodness. But they talk about Aaron's attitude and how he feels toward the team. And a lot of times I don't agree with Stephen A. Smith, but here I do. After as many years as Aaron has been the head of this team, it's almost been a total waste of his talent. He's always had weapons. When he first started, he had Donald Driver, Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, the works. And and looking at the receivers, especially the last couple of weeks, he has a receiving core now. But I think, you mentioned this last night. He was snapping the ball and he had defenders already in his face.
Yeah.
And this was against San Francisco.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, later on, but we go against the Rams next week. And, they have a team with Sue and
Donald, yeah.
Donald, this team that they're going to be all over Aaron. They're going to pressure him all game long because they have the corners to do so.
Yeah.
And so Aaron has the talent, and we both know that if you're a Packer, it doesn't matter if you're not a Packers fan. Aaron Rodgers has the talent. But when he's snapping the ball and he has three defenders in his face as soon as he snaps the ball, you can't expect him to do what he did last night, week in and week out. It's just not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, even if you look at the Patriots game, their front seven, they put a ton of pressure on Mahomes. Their front seven isn't a joke. Their secondary could use some work, but their front seven is not to be messed around with. And you have those two teams who have prolific offenses, and they could blow us out in a hurry. And especially,
and we're traveling to both.
Yeah, and
it's across the country, across country.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I wanna have a lot of faith, coming out of the bye, and I'm hoping that with the bye you have Allison, Cobb, Jair Alexander, Spriggs, everybody getting healthy. That's obviously the hope, but at the same time, you kind of hope that there's some adjustments to be made. But I think what's on the minds of all Packers fans, and I have my opinion and I've expressed it throughout the weeks, and we'll talk about it again. But I'm kind of curious on your take of it. Because the question that I get constantly every single week is, what is wrong with the Packers? Because if you look at our defense, right, it ain't Dom Capers anymore. He's not there. Nope. We got Pettin in there. We finally tossed him out. We have, I would argue, the talent in some areas, right? Like you have your Blake Martinez, Burks when he's playing. You have Mike Daniels. Nick Perry just had 3 swats last night of the ball. The secondary is young, but they look pretty darn good. And we obviously have holes, when it comes to pass rush, and we have holes when it comes to the safety position. But do you think it's more of a personnel problem, or do you think it's more of like a scheming issue? Like, I'm just curious of what you think is the problem with the 2018 Green Bay Packers.
This was another thing that I had, I thought about a lot last night as I was sitting down and thinking about this interview, because when you look at both sides of the ball, it's obvious that Green Bay has some gaping holes. Offensively, our offensive line, we just don't have depth at O-line. And we hit on that already. But defensively, I don't know. We drafted Jair, who was hurt. He was hurt last game, but Jair and Josh Jackson have proven they can be starters in time.
Yeah.
They have some growing to do. Josh Jackson, you can tell he's really raw. He had that holding call last night where I don't know what he was doing, but you can tell that they're growing. Jair has come along really quickly. I think our secondary's fine, but Green Bay's problem is they're just not getting pressure like we wanted it with like we need them to. You can't expect, a 800-year-old Williams teamed with, safeties that are taking bad angles and Clinton Dixon. You don't even know if he wants to be on the Packers anymore.
Yeah.
There's just so many issues. I think it starts in the locker room. Defensively, there just doesn't seem to be any leadership. We have Mike Daniels, of course, and he's completely outspoken, but he can't do more than, control that front seven, who now doesn't have Wilkerson anymore.
Yeah. So,
honestly, the more I thought about it, the more lost I got, because on paper, Packers should be blowing teams out. With the offense that we have, we have Aaron Jones back, who should be getting the ball more than he's getting. I understand that we're having this whole, we want, Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, and Ty Montgomery to all get touches, but he has half the touches the other backs do, and he already has just as many yards.
Mm-hmm.
And when you only have, three rushing touchdowns in the year, and Aaron Rodgers is already having to throw 40 times a game and we're only in week 6, it's just hard to tell. I just don't know. And the more I ask myself, the more I just I don't have an answer.
Yeah, and you know what? I think to speak about the locker room issue, at least when it comes to the defense, that was why I wanted to keep a guy around like Morgan Burnett. And while
Absolutely.
I don't think he was in it wasn't, his elite days were over. He's not really playing too hot in Pittsburgh, but the guy he's a veteran. He's been there for a long time. He's been there for the good and the bad of the Green Bay Packers. And as you're having this transition come in where you're getting a new defensive coordinator, when you're getting those new talent, it would have been really nice to have that kind of veteran influence. And you have Clay Matthews on there, and you have, like you said, you have Mike Daniels, but especially for that backfield. And I think that was the hope of bringing in Tramon Williams. But when you have guys like, Tramon Williams is back there, Kentrell Bryce, who...
Ooh.
Yes, I think that's all that needs to be said about Kentrell Bryce. It's funny you say that Alexander and Jackson have proven themselves to be starters. Those guys have come right from the draft, and even though you and I both know that they have a bunch of growing pains to go through, they are still our best chance at winning with that backfield. That.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's wow, we drafted these great guys, or if that's more of a reflection on how poor and how little depth we have in that backfield. I'm curious, do you think it's an issue of wow, we drafted really well, which I think we did, or is it an issue of God, we are so starved for talent, on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, I want to add, just very briefly, why the reason I brought up locker room is because we watch defensive players from our locker room leave, go to other teams, and become superior talents. Micah Hyde, he's turned into one of the better safeties in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to talk about, the person that went to the Chargers and
good old,
led the league in.
Good old Casey Hayward. Yeah, you know what? We'll talk about that because you know what? I don't know if that's a locker room thing, but I understand why a lot, and you're not the only one. I get that at least every other week, someone's just like, "Hey, remember when we had Casey Hayward?" And I'm like, "Yes, I remember, guys. I was there."
But speaking on Josh Jackson, really quickly, Josh Jackson reminds me a lot of what we had in Sam Shields. Sam Shields only played 1 year of college.
Yeah.
He played 1 year of college. He came in, and we weren't sure what we had. He was really rough around the edges the first year or two, but he turned into a stud.
Yeah.
He turned into our best corner. He was picking off everything, and that's why I like, where we are now. But we just need somebody to step up and take control of that secondary. Because HaHa doesn't even seem like he wants to be there anymore.
Yeah, I'm torn on him because if we're talking about the Packers are missing a veteran presence, getting rid of HaHa Clinton-Dix is not going to solve that in any way, shape, or form. That's not
at all. And then we won't have anybody.
Exactly. Then who do you have? And I understand, listen, HaHa hasn't played up to the expectations for once we drafted him, right? He's been
he's still losing picks.
Yeah, he does. He's a solid player. Don't get me wrong, but he does make boneheaded moves. The coverage is. There's aspects of his play to be desired. But that being said, again, I'll never forgive him for the 2014 NFC Championship game. I will never forgive him for that. But all that being said, if you're saying that for the defense, and I think almost unanimously Packers fans will agree on this, that we need a pass rusher in the draft, right? I think we can agree on that. That's
absolutely.
Yeah, probably the number one issue we have on defense. If you get rid of HaHa Clinton-Dix, now throw safety on top of that too. And that's not saying that we don't necessarily need a safety now, but the problem is you need someone right now, literally immediately to fill in for HaHa Clinton-Dix. And so
if you let HaHa walk, Kentrell's our starting safety. He's our number one safety.
That is literally the darkest timeline. That is how we just go to the dark ages.
just put another linebacker up there and have a run a no safety.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, throw throw Jamon Moore back there, because at that point, why not? Why not? And yeah, so I mean, it's an issue of, I understand, Packers fans, you're not happy with Clinton Dix. Obviously, his attitude isn't great, but you are then going to, not only do we need to hit a home run on a pass rusher, we also need to hit a home run on a safety as well. And, the Packers are, even though it might be very frustrating, are a draft and develop team. And so, that being said, you want to pick up a safety this coming draft, whether we keep or not. But it would be better if you didn't have to throw him into the fire immediately. Like we have to do right now with Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson, simply because we just don't have the talent at the positions.
I love Jair Alexander, but I really think that the Packers should have taken a stretch on Derwin James. This is something that, I love Jair. I think he's going to be a great corner. But if I could go back and change one thing, it would be chase someone like a Derwin James, because we just have nothing.
Especially if the cards fall the same way, in which, we're able to get Derwin James and Josh Jackson.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, yeah, that would have been nice. But, again, I think, shoring up the backfield and having, if we could get 2 great corners out of it, great, wonderful. I'll be happy with that. But our next thing is definitely to look at safety and pass rusher. Now, going on the other side of the ball, right, and taking, because here, real quick, but before we even go over there, like I feel like I need to mention this as well. I feel like, regardless of how bad the defense is, I feel like they are playing better than they have in previous years. And I know it's only, week 6 or week 7, because they have been put in situations like that Lions game. That loss is not on that defense at all. Not even close.
Not at all.
Last night, they didn't play great, but they have also come up with stops when they needed it. They also forced, 2 fumbles and an interception. So they did what they had to do, and they're making those key stops. They're not as good, but those turnovers, for example, like that was the defining moment of our Super Bowl run, right? And that the defense really wasn't like amazing when it came to, stopping on 3rd down or yardage or anything like that, but they freaking picked off everything. They were getting turnover after turnover after turnover. And so, if we are starting to get back to that, and I think Pettine is doing a good job for what he has to work with, I would say if there's anything like a little ray of hope that I can grab about this defense, it's that we are playing better than we have seen in previous years from this Packers defense.
Yeah, I think what a lot of especially Packers fans, because like you said earlier, we've been given great years of football. I think what a lot of people and a lot of us have to do is just take a second to step back. We're running a whole new scheme on defense. Things are changing. We have young players now. It's a whole different situation in Green Bay now. And I think that, when we went from that transfer between when we got Dom Capers, it was the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be, but I can tell you, we're going to see where the heart lies of this defense over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, no,
where we're going to see exactly what that defense has.
Yeah, this is like the litmus test for our entire season. And while, our season isn't over or, won if we win these next 2 games, I think this is going to really kind of put together what the Packers' identity is for 2018.
Absolutely. No doubt.
And so, all right, so we looked at the defense. We diagnosed, or at least attempted to diagnose, what's going on that side of the ball. And then here we go again, in which we're talking about the offense. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, back-to-back 400-yard weeks, multiple touchdowns, no interceptions, all great, wonderful stuff. But that being said, if you're going back to your word of consistency, this offense has been far from consistent. Ooh. Far from consistent. And I thought, Jason, last night, when on that first drive, when we just drove down the field and we were just...
I thought it was over.
I was like, yes, this is finally what I've been waiting for. Like, this is the Packers offense I've been craving. And then that didn't happen anymore. But so that, I'll put that all together. We obviously have a ton of new talent at wide receiver. And in the past 2 weeks, they've had to step up with Allison and Cobb out, obviously. We don't have Jordy Nelson anymore. And I think that's a big loss. I do. I completely understand the reasoning on why he's gone, but it's a big loss. You have Devontae stepping up to the number one role, which I think he's filling in quite well. And you also have this running back by committee thing that you're trying, all while you have Jimmy Graham thrown in there, who his expectations, good God, talk about overhyped through the moon. And then you have an offensive line who has always struggled to be healthy. And as you were saying about defenders in the face, you have all these moving pieces going on at once. And then you have Aaron Rodgers, who, if he has like the slightest off game, he's going to get destroyed by the media, obviously, because they're going to be like, oh, he's lost a step, what have you. But I think that just speaks to this entire team is Aaron Rodgers. It is. Like, there's no arguing that. You see that every time he goes down, that you're like, okay, we're screwed. The whole team's Aaron Rodgers. And so, I was hoping that there was a little bit of an offense built around him this year. But I think with all those moving pieces, it's easy to remember that, Aaron is going through a lot of stuff. He's coming off a major injury. He also got injured, week 1 of this year, which he's not back at 100%. But the missed throws, the holding on to the ball too long, etc. You put that all together with all these moving pieces, and you get an inconsistent offense. What are you thinking?
Man, this offense, it has me pulling my hair out. You hit on a ton of the good points. First of all, I want to touch on the media thing really fast. The media gives Aaron a lot of hit, and they talk about how far less superior the team is compared to Aaron. Let's just be frank. It doesn't matter what team Aaron goes to. He will be way more talented than the rest of his team.
Yeah.
That is just who Aaron is. He's an all-world talent. Tom Brady's the same thing in New England. Mm-hmm. The next thing is this. Aaron Rodgers has been sacked way too many times. Yeah. I mean, he's been sacked 18 times is what I'm seeing?
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah, 19
it's up there.
times. 19 times. And he's been hit 19 times. We don't really have Aaron Jones, is a running back you can put back there and, he can block, or Jamal Williams can do the same. This offense, like I said, it really has me kind of frustrated because at times, you're right, we look like, we're a lights-out offense. The beginning of that game, Aaron went down the field 2 plays. We were in the end zone. Adams already has almost 600 yards of offense. Jimmy Graham has 400 yards of offense. We have receivers that are getting the job done, but I just don't think it can be said enough how inconsistent of a team, of an offense we are. And a lot of it does go through the arm of Rodgers.
Yeah.
If he doesn't have time to throw, he's good. Aaron's not one to get flustered. He doesn't get frustrated. He doesn't give up on games. He's going to keep trying to the very end. It's what makes him such a great, competitor. But, he can only do so much. There's only so much as a talent that he can do to necessarily bring us to a victory. Teams like the Bears that now have a superior talent, and now San Francisco, who he's had to come back and win. And even when he's been up on teams like Minnesota, then the defense is inconsistent and slows him down. It really just doesn't seem like much of a win situation for Aaron, and it's frustrating because I love watching him play. I mean, even if I wasn't a Packers fan, I would love watching Aaron, the way Aaron throws the ball, his release, his just IQ in the pocket. It's unreal.
Yeah.
The things that he can accomplish. He was in a brace last night and pulled off a 20, 30-yard run, moving out of the pocket to get away from pressure. That's just who he is, and he's going to give 100% every game. His frustration and why media gets on him is because there are players out there that are not giving the same that he's giving.
Yeah.
Receivers are dropping passes. Even Adams is dropping passes out there.
Yep. Yeah. No, and I think the number one issue is, and I actually kind of just thought about this. So the number one comparison that's always made between it's Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, right? Like that's
Right.
always the never-ending debate. And if you don't have Tom Brady, like Tom Brady doesn't exist. Tom Brady's not in the league, in which this guy has what five Super Bowl rings. They're constant. It's insane the program that they have put together, and I think you see because I think Tom Brady's like the only person who is comparable at the moment to Aaron Rodgers. You know, Drew Brees, phenomenal quarterback. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like it's Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers sitting on top of the mountain currently in the NFL.
Right.
So that being said, if you take away Tom Brady and I don't want to say the expectations, but the example of a franchise that has this amazing quarterback, and because they have this amazing quarterback, they're always in the Super Bowl, right? If you take away that example, I don't think Aaron Rodgers and our expectations as Packer fans, my expectations would be as high. Because I think there are times where the constant thing that gets brought up, and I even brought this up to Mark Murphy, the idea of like we're wasting Rodgers' career, right? I think you brought it up even earlier about we're wasting his prime, blah, blah, I hear it all the time. But that being said, it is really difficult to get to a Super Bowl.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in the NFC.
Especially in the NFC, right? It's insanely difficult to win. It's difficult to get into the playoffs. You look at talented teams, you know, like the Vikings. You know what I mean? Like, you know, teams that are up and coming, and you see how difficult it is to be consistently good. And yet,
on that point, before you move on, just briefly, you know, I said NFC because a lot of times it's not really fair to compare whether Tom Brady's always there and Aaron's not, because Tom Brady usually has a cakewalk all the way to the playoffs.
Correct.
His division hasn't been that good. The AFC is way less superior than the NFC. And not to mention, the majority of the times that the Packers aren't in the Super Bowl with Tom Brady, they're gone in the NFC Championship or the divisional round. They're always there competing. They just never get past the best teams in the NFC.
Yeah. Yeah, and I 100% agree. What was that video? Like 2 years ago, I made a Tom Brady versus Aaron Rodgers video, and I got destroyed on the internet for that video because I brought up that exact point that not only is the AFC superior, it's a lot more inferior than the NFC, but Tom Brady has also had a freaking team around him. They've had top 15 defenses almost his entire tenure, and Rodgers has had that twice, I think. If you're not even counting this season. But regardless, I'm not going to make this a Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers episode. But that being said, I feel like our expectations are higher because Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and the Patriots exist. If they didn't exist, I feel like we are not as obviously we're disappointed when we don't go to the Super Bowl, but we don't have you know what I'm trying to say? In that, like, if we don't have that freak of nature that is the New England Patriots, you don't have that consistency and constantly going to the Super Bowl. Packers fans would be a lot more happy that we're at least consistently in the playoffs.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, I've heard this debate a lot, too. If it were reversed and we had Tom and they had Aaron, we wouldn't be as good as we are with Tom.
Oh, no.
And the Patriots would be far better with Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, yeah. No, I completely agree.
They would have more Super Bowls. So I don't get into the Tom Brady Aaron Rodgers debate simply because, number one, Mike McCarthy is not Bill Belichick.
Nope.
And number two, you know, as a winner, Tom Brady will go down as the best quarterback of all time. Mm-hmm. But as a player, Aaron Rodgers will go down as the best talent so far to step onto the field that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality. That's why I don't get involved in it, because you can't debate with people who think that a team award makes the best quarterback, and it just doesn't.
Yeah. In that case, you know, like Eli Manning's better than Dan Marino. I mean, like anybody who has a Super Bowl ring is better than Dan Marino.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, but you look at that example. Like, that's a perfect. Look at Brett Favre too, right? Brett Favre, Hall of Fame quarterback, 3-time MVP, 1 Super Bowl ring. You know, it is difficult. And what the Patriots have done, I don't think we will ever see again. When Tom Brady and Bill Belichick eventually ride off into the sunset, you know, when they're all 105 years old, I don't think we'll ever see that kind of performance like put together ever again. And again, that's to their credit. And you touched on something, which is what I want to talk about next, and something that has been the gripe of many Packers fans throughout the years. Because if we're talking about wasted potential, if we're talking about wasted prime, a lot of the heat falls at the feet of the head coach, Mike McCarthy. And I feel like in the past few years, and I want to say it's been since 2014, his seat has gotten progressively hotter. It happened with the terrible play calling in the NFC Championship game, which, again, it wasn't all Mike, but he definitely contributed to it. It happens where in the teams where he's like hyping up Brett Hundley to be like this next guy, developing, and, the best thing he can do is chew bubble gum. It's constantly falling at the feet of McCarthy. He just got a 1-year extension last year, which I think is telling because, in my opinion, and I've said this now for the past 2 years, I think this year, if the Packers don't make the playoffs, Mike McCarthy's job is in serious jeopardy because Rodgers, as you and I both agree, makes this team look significantly better than they are. He has helped make, and I think McCarthy's a good coach, don't get me wrong, but he has helped make McCarthy's career, just like Tom Brady has helped make Bill Belichick's career. I would argue Belichick's still a better coach, but what have you. So that being said, where do you fall on the Mike McCarthy debate? Because in my opinion, it's really easy to blame McCarthy, and he's got his flaws. I will be the first one to say that.
Right.
But at the same time, head coaches are not just like Hall of Fame head coaches or even competent head coaches are not growing on trees. They're not just everywhere on the market. And so you might be left in a situation where you are worse off, kind of like the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Right.
So where are you on this debate?
Oh, man, I'm going to have such an unpopular opinion on your channel. I totally disagree with this Mike McCarthy thing, and I disagree for a number of reasons. I'm going to do something that Max Kellerman does, and I'm going to bring analytics into this a little bit.
Oh, do it up.
So Mike McCarthy is in his 13th year as our head coach. This is his 13th year. He's going strong. He's coached 198 games. In that 198 games up to this point, he's 124, 72, and 2. So that's a .631 winning percentage. Okay. In that 13th year span, he only has 2 losing seasons, and he has 2 seasons of 8-8, and one of them was 8-8, and one's 8-7-1. The reason I disagree with this Mike McCarthy thing is, number one, my first point was that if you let go of Mike McCarthy, we could go through the dark ages before we find another head coach. You're not going to find anybody as productive as Mike McCarthy, just off there on the street somewhere. Mm-hmm. My second point is Mike McCarthy took a lot of heat for the Brett Hundley thing, but as Packers fans, we've got to slow the roll. We got super lucky that Aaron Rodgers fell to us in that draft, and we had Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers back to back.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really difficult to suggest, Aaron Rodgers gets hurt and somebody's going to come out there and win 14 games for us, and the guy hasn't had a snap because Aaron Rodgers doesn't leave the game. I think that's totally, totally wrong. I think Mike McCarthy's seat is definitely in heat because the Green Bay Packers, they're the only, community-owned team in the National Football League. There's a lot of pressure on everybody involved, and it all comes down on that head coach. But I just disagree that Mike McCarthy should be put under this microscope like, this is, totally his fault, because the personnel above Mike McCarthy are the people that go out and actually sign people to put on that team. And if there are not people, we just had a GM change, we just had a defensive coordinator change, we had all this happen. We've got Jimmy Graham who came. We're being more productive and aggressive in free agency. I disagree with this mentality that just because we're having a couple of rough years in a row, all of a sudden Mike McCarthy is to blame. Like I said, Mike McCarthy's done nothing but be productive. And I didn't mention that the other season, all the other winning seasons he had, those other 10, 11 years, a lot of them were, 10-6, 11-5 years. He's only missed the playoff three times, And one of them was last year when Aaron Rodgers was hurt for the year.
Now,
in his 13-year tenure.
Yeah, and I agree. Like that sounds really good. I'm going to provide a counterpoint in that I think what people would argue is that winning record is due to Aaron Rodgers. You know what I mean?
But if Bill Belichick had to play Brett Hundley for any amount of given time, he might not win those games either. You know, he had Jimmy Garoppolo.
He also had
and Brissett.
Yeah, because all right. So here's where I'm going to slightly disagree here, because Bill Belichick, and here's where I think the argument of like coaching comes into play, right? Tom Brady, while no one's really going to doubt him, I think people could also call him, like, he does have there's a system for him. I don't want to call him a system QB because that has negative connotations to it, but there's a system in place, because the perfect example of that is Matt Castle. Because Matt Castle, who hasn't done diddly squat, listen, he's an NFL player, more talented in his left thumb than I will ever be athletically. But, Matt Castle gets him to the playoffs. Tom Brady goes down and Matt Castle steps in. And I think the argument of what makes fans upset about the Packers is because last year you have two prime examples of, and obviously they're different teams, there's different personnel, etc., about Vikings quarterbacks going down. Case Keenum steps up, and then you have on the Eagles, Carson Wentz goes down, and Nick Foles makes him go to the Super Bowl. And so while I completely agree with you that it is completely unrealistic that an amazing QB is also going to fall to us, and he just happens to be our backup, and that it's all going to work out. But at the same time, I would argue, like, when Aaron Rodgers goes down, like, we're not even competitive. Like, we're going into overtime against the Browns, and it's when the Browns are the Browns. It's not this Baker Mayfield, Denzel Ward Browns. This is the Browns.
Oh, you mean when our backup quarterback was their starter?
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that's the biggest issue, because I don't think that if you're realistic with yourself as a Packers fan, if Aaron Rodgers goes down, there's not going to be another Aaron Rodgers waiting in the wings. It's not going to happen. But I think it's fair to at least expect that we're going to be competitive. And I think that's what's frustrating for Packers fans when you see other teams doing this. Castle's an old, outdated example, but I think he proves true of the system thing. But you see it in which, and again, Minnesota has a much better defense, especially last year, than we did. And the Eagles had a much better defense than we did.
Right.
But their offense, if we're saying that we have all these weapons, shouldn't we be able to have at least a competent QB come in and be able to utilize those weapons?
Well, that was the negative I was going to give Mike McCarthy. I gave the positive, and I do have a negative point. Watching not just this year, but years prior, especially when Brett Hundley was in, our offense is very, very vanilla. Very, very vanilla.
Oh, yeah.
We've turned into a lot of times we're now a dink and dunk, or, we'll do screens, or we'll, hand it off on first down. There's no excitement in our offense. When I was coming up, and the days of Donald Driver, Greg Jennings, Aaron used to plant and just send that thing downfield.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter who was back there, who was covering who. The receiver was just gone. It didn't matter. And Aaron he doesn't have Donald Driver, Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, but he has Devontae Adams, and he has weapons that can still do that. My problem is that, and you called this last night, and I called it too at the same time. There was a play, I think it was in the third quarter. San Francisco came on a blitz, and Green Bay just decided to hand it off in the midst of a run blitz.
Yeah, and
it's a lot of give up plays on third and long. They don't dial up anything to try to get the first down. It's kind of dink it to Devontae and hope he gets it.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, if you're going to be Mike McCarthy, if you're going to have Aaron Rodgers, use him, use his arm, because you're never going to see another arm like that. You're never going to see another talent like that. Call plays, you can do it. You've proven it. You have a Super Bowl in your name.
Yeah.
But come back and call those plays. I understand your offensive line is not good, but you also have people like Mercedes Lewis that can come back and can come in the backfield in that fullback position and block if Aaron has to roll out. You can do those things, to help Aaron, to give him that time. But I agree. I do agree. Mike McCarthy's gone kind of soft especially in the last few years. And maybe it has a lot to do with our quarterback position, Aaron's health, the lack of weapons.
Sure.
But, it's not that Mike McCarthy doesn't have the potential. And that's why if I were the Green Bay Packers, I would be really skeptical about moving on from Mike McCarthy, because you're not just going to go find a Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
You're not just going to go find let's not put him down. Zimmerman in Minnesota is a really good coach.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia Eagles have a good coach. You're not just going to go and find one. You've seen teams in the last year or two go out, unless you're going to go to Alabama and get Saban to come and coach the Green Bay Packers. We're not going to go out there and find somebody that's going to help us the way that that Mike McCarthy knows how to run the type of offense that Aaron wants to run.
Yeah, and again, I think it's really easy to dump it all on Mike McCarthy, because again, he's the front guy. Because I think as fans, when we have, like you said, an all-world talent, we start looking for explanations as to, okay, how come we're not the Patriots? Like, how come we are not winning Super Bowls? How come we are not at least appearing in multiple Super Bowls? And yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. I think this is something that's going to rage on until either we win another Super Bowl or Mike McCarthy's fired. It's kind of gonna.
Right.
It's I think something has to give, and I feel like it is gonna come sooner rather than later. Because
I think if we miss the playoffs this year, there's gonna be some problems.
Yeah, I think that
within our team.
Yeah, there's gonna be some panic mode going on. That being said, looking ahead at this season, we're off to a rocky start. We're chilling at number 2 behind the Bears. The Bears are also playing the Patriots this week, so they got a tough game. It's real possible that we might be coming in, hopefully as number 1. But then again, we also have 2 monster teams that we're playing as soon as we get back from the bye. So what are your predictions looking like for the rest of the season? Do you think we're going to make the playoffs? Do you think the Packers get it together? What are your thoughts?
Oh man, when I look through the schedule, I couldn't have been more sad. We start off, like you said, we have the Rams and the Patriots.
Yeah.
I honestly, realistically, I see us losing both. I just don't think we're together enough to beat either team. The Patriots put up 40 on Kansas City. I understand Kansas City has a bad defense, but they also have a killer offense. And Green Bay's offense is nothing what Kansas City's offense is.
Yeah, I agree.
The Rams, I don't see us getting 200 yards against the Rams. I just don't. I see us losing both. But on the positive side, I see those 2 and the Vikings as the only 3 losses we take for the remainder of the season.
Okay.
I very seriously think after the bye week we will get things going, because let's not forget, before we freak out, let's remember last season doesn't count because I don't even think about last season. But the year before, and even the year before that, Green Bay started off really slow. And Green Bay should be accustomed to being in playoff mode right after the bye, because that's typical for us. That's typical for the Green Bay fan base. We're always there. Aaron Rodgers is always better off when he comes in the second half of the season. And to be honest, I really don't see many teams that can give us a problem. We played Miami at home. That should be a win. We play Seattle in Seattle. I don't like the Seattle Seahawks. I don't understand why we have a problem with them. But they're not the Seattle of old.
No.
So we can win that one. Minnesota, we played them in Minnesota. I just don't see us beating Minnesota in Minnesota. But then we have the Cardinals, Falcons at home, Bears, Jets, and then the Lions. And that Bears game could be for the top of the division.
Yeah, I agree.
So realistically, I see us at 10-5-1 at the end of the year. That's where I see us. I see us ending positively. We've had our rough stretch. This was supposed to be our easy stretch at the beginning of the season.
Yep.
Supposedly, because we play the majority of the rest of the schedule away.
Yeah.
So, like I said, unless something major happens, we lose Aaron, knock on wood, or something crazy happens, we're going to be healthier after the bye. Aaron Jones should be fine now. He should be able to handle more of a workload. So, yeah, I see realistically we lose to the Rams. If we can get a win between either the Rams or the Patriots, we could be in good shape.
Yeah, and I think if, like you said, I think if we get a win, that's going to silence a lot of people. It's gonna be the Aaron of old with the shh. Because again, a lot, listen, we might struggle against the 49ers. We might struggle against a lot of teams we shouldn't. But if we're able to go in to either LA, I would argue LA, Minnesota, or New England and beat one of those teams, yeah, I think I agree. I think we're looking pretty good.
The reason why I have such an issue with these first 2 weeks is even though we're coming off of a bye, like I said, we're playing LA in New England at Gillette. That's a cross-country trip against two of the toughest teams in the league. Not two maybe of, harder teams in the league. They're the two top teams in the league right now.
Yeah.
It's the Rams and the Patriots, and we play them back-to-back. The schedule makers were not kind to the Packers off their bye.
No,
they were not kind to us off the bye.
Not so much. I like the only thing I can hope for is that we are healthy, and because we're gonna need everything to throw at these teams. So it's gonna be a long stretch. So buckle up, Buttercup. It's gonna be something. But Jason, it's been phenomenal talking to you. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, talking some sense. Hopefully, talking some Packer fans off the ledge, or at least postponing the ledge.
Hey man, before you do your intro, I want to give a shout out to Mike Hughes. He's the cornerback for the Minnesota Vikings. I know he's our rival, but he went to school here in my hometown, and we just got the news that he has a torn ACL.
Yeah.
And so prayers for a speedy recovery from him. I know he's a rival, but I don't think anybody likes to see an injury of that magnitude.
No, definitely not. And I actually really liked Mike Hughes. I thought the Packers actually might wind up picking him up in the draft. So, you never want to see that on any team. But, Jason, it's been great talking to you. Thank you again for coming on the show. And hopefully the rest of the season provides some wonderful victories.
Go Pack, go.
You can check Jason out on Instagram. The link to his Instagram profile will be in the description. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com, TomGrossi Comedy, or Tom Grossi Comedy on the Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. You can also pick up a copy of my debut comedy album, Allergic to Fun. You can pick up a digital copy on iTunes and Amazon, or a physical copy at TomGrossiComedy.com. Check out Packcast on SoundCloud, Google Play Music, and, of course, iTunes and here on the YouTube. We do content at least 3 times a week, and we stream every single Packers game live, where you could either watch me cheer or cry, or sometimes both. Also, when this comes out, it'll be less than 18 days till the New York City Marathon. I'm running for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, so check that out. They're a great organization, and you can donate on my behalf. And you can also coupon code, wonderful, if you decide to buy some tickets at SeatGeek, whether it's a Packers game or anything else. Use the promo code Tom Grossi, and you'll save $20 off your first purchase. So there you go, some free money, and it helps out the show. So, Packers fans, we can't lose next week. It's a beautiful feeling. I love it. Feeling good. I feel good. I hope we come out swinging and we make a statement against the Los Angeles Rams. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.